Hey guys, Alex from Board Game Co. over here, and today we're talking about Ankh, and more specifically, why I'm backing Ankh. Now, Ankh is the newest game from CMON Games, from CMON Games. It's the third part of the trilogy of Blood Rage, Rising Sun, and now Ankh. Now, by trilogy, I mean more of a spiritual, games in common kind of trilogy. They're not actually connected, but they are by the same publisher, the same designer, the same artist, the same miniature company, all working together to create a series of games that are not only beautifully produced but also have some degree of commonality, and that main commonality in this case is shared by the area control mechanic. They all have this area control mechanic where you score points based off of what you're controlling, and you get different benefits for different things, and you're trying to draft amazing creatures. They have a lot in common while also being uniquely different, or at least Rising Sun and Blood Rage are uniquely different, and if anything is to go by it, Ankh is uniquely different, even more so. I already did a how to play video which covered more of the brief overview. I'm sure a lot of things have and will change from that, but you can watch that video up here. But Ankh is it's an Egyptian themed game in the trilogy. Blood Rage was Vikings, Rising Sun was, and they're right behind me over here. We got Blood Rage, we got Rising Sun. Rising Sun was what's it called, Japan or samurai or that kind of theme, and then we have Ankh coming in with an Egyptian theme. Now personally, I love Egyptian themes. I would say it probably is my most favorite of the three themes. I already love Kemet, which will be coming out with its own Kickstarter later this year, and Ankh is a game that I am 100% backing. Now, I do have mixed thoughts on the Kickstarter, don't get me wrong. I have mixed thoughts based on what is up on the Kickstarter already, and I will very likely do a second video once we know more about the optional buys. Towards the end of the campaign, I'll probably do a second video updating it with my thoughts, because I'm sure a lot of things will change. And while I don't usually do two videos for Kickstarters, this is definitely going to be a big one, and it's one that I'm happy to do a second video for, because I love Blood Rage. Blood Rage is my #1 game of all time, which leads to my reasons to backing. The first reason I will be backing it is because Blood Rage is my #1 game of all time. Rising Sun is a game I thoroughly enjoy. It's not in my top 20, it's probably my top 50 somewhere, but it is a game I thoroughly enjoy, but it's not even close to Blood Rage, or at least not for me personally. That being said, Ankh looks fascinating, and in my opinion, and this is where it gets tricky, in my opinion so far, Ankh is either going to be incredible or incredibly bad. Don't get me wrong, it can definitely fall halfway through, but what I mean by that is it's bringing interesting mechanics to the table. It's bringing interesting changes to the genre to the table, things that you don't usually see in a game like this. It has two specific features that are very unique for this style of area control, dudes on a map fighting games. They're definitely going to mix things up a bit. They're definitely going to change the landscape of gaming, because they will either work and be adopted or encourage other people to take these risks, or they will be horrible failures, and people are critiquing them already, but I'm assuming they have been played. Let's come into this. Let's talk about these. So the first feature that Ankh has is it has player elimination. Player elimination is very risky, although I will note, CMON actually did do it recently but kind of halfway. It did it with Cthulhu Death May Die, but that's more of a cooperative game, so it's a little different. But player elimination is a concept that is very, very risky in good games, because you don't want the classic risk scenario. You spend 3 hours at the table, and then suddenly, for the last hour, you are watching your friends play. That is terrible. It is bad game design. Now, my assumption, which is not an unreasonable assumption, is Eric Lang knows this. So when Eric Lang designs a game that has player elimination, it very likely happens in the last quarter of, not even quarter, the last part of the game. Meaning, I don't know exactly, the game is supposed to come in at 2 hours, maybe it will, maybe not, maybe it'll do less even. But if in the last 15 minutes players are watching, you might be able to get away with that if it's a good enough game. If it's the last half an hour, that is going to be a major strike against it. So the fact that Ankh has player elimination is definitely a risk in the genre, and if they've pulled it off successfully, it will be tense. It will add to the game in an incredible way if it's pulled off successfully. Or it'll be something people say, This is why we don't have player elimination. The second mechanic, and this is also an interesting one, is it's a catch-up mechanic that totally changes the landscape of gaming, which is towards the end of the game, the two weakest gods combine into one and act together as one combined force. And this is, I mean, the game says it's rated for 2 to 5 players. So first of all, I don't know how you have the mechanic with 2 players. We'll get to that later. But even, let's say 3 players, okay? If you're playing a 3-player game of Ankh, and one player has to then be strong enough to fight 2 weaker players, that is a fascinating thing if it's done well. Because it's either going to be horrible, it's either going to be the worst catch-up mechanic of all time that incentivizes you to be in last place so that you can actually win the game. Or it will be, again, tremendous, pulling people into the game. Because player elimination, while it is a bad thing to have in gaming, it's not that much better when people complain about how, let's say in Food Chain Magnate, the last half an hour of the game, the last hour of the game, depending who you talk to, they complain that, well, you clearly know who the winner is. Well, it's totally different with what CMON's doing here, because they are simultaneously eliminating players, taking them out of the game, and also combining players so that they can potentially win but stay in the game. But that has to be balanced so as to not be a terrible catch-up mechanic that incentivizes you to be in last place. So these are both major risks to the genre, and I am assuming, again, not unreasonably, that Eric Lang has play tested these specifically, meaning when you have a standard typical game, it's kind of easier to pass standard mechanics through playtesting and miss something. But when you're taking risks, you are, assuming you're doing a halfway decent job, you are going to playtest those risks to no end, specifically because they are risks. So I'm almost excited that these things are in the game, because assuming they did their job halfway decently, they playtested these risks very heavily and have seen them work. Now, obviously, things can change through development, which is a little risky. You can have something that worked well, but then they change something else, which totally messes these up. Hopefully they come out well. Hopefully they come out great on the other side. I am looking forward to these changes in gaming, because these guys know what they're doing. They produce games people like, for the most part. So hopefully they'll be exciting. So I'm backing Ankh. Reason number 2. So reason 1, Blood Rage is my favorite game of all time. Reason 2, these things that many people are quoting as downsides, I view as reasons to back. They are risks, they are interesting, and I'm hoping that this produces a unique game for my collection. A game that ups the tenseness of the landscape and does a great job. Reason number 3, the game is gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. The miniatures are gorgeous. The artwork on the board and the components, where they're criticized for coming out with those later, but those they look beautiful now. It looks like a great game. And reason number 4, and this is always the big one if you watch these videos, this game will almost certainly hold its value. This is a CMON game, CMON games in general. I think the only exception I can really think of for a CMON miniatures game that doesn't hold its value is Besieged. Actually, maybe some of the fake Kickstarters, the shortened Kickstarters that they do that don't really add stretch goals, but generally a CMON Kickstarter holds value, and that's a big thing for me. It doesn't matter how much I like Blood Rage. It doesn't matter for me how much I'm excited about these mechanics. It doesn't matter for me about the game art being beautiful if the game is going to be cheaper later. I am not here to just give you my money for no reason. I'm not here to give you my money because I'm excited. Especially with CMON games, where you can get the retail game earlier sometimes. So I'm only backing because I believe there's a win for me. And if any previous CMON game is anything to go by, this will be another CMON pledge that holds its value. Another CMON pledge that will either give you an incredible game with lots of extras, or you can resell it for more than you paid for it. Maybe not a huge killing, especially as more people back on this Kickstarter reselling train. It gets harder and harder to make money, but hopefully they will, it should at the very least hold its value. In terms of my concerns, now off the bat, my first concern is one that's going to be a plus for a lot of people, but it's a bit of a con for me, which is day one, a lot of the Kickstarter stretch goals are coming through, and so far they seem to be a decent amount of player component upgrades and fewer miniature upgrades. So, meaning I have nothing against these upgrades, but I like the miniatures. I like the extra gods, the extra heroes, the extra factions. In this case, I don't think there's heroes. The extra monsters, the guardians. I like the miniature upgrades, the things that add content to your game. I don't mind the component upgrades. I'm certainly not against them, but I'm already, as usual with most CMON games, the way they go through a Kickstarter campaign is people complaining that there's not enough stuff, and then you get to the end and there's enough stuff. That's usually the way it works. I always share the same concerns that other people have. I'm also always worried, like, oh no, Marvel United, look how few stuff there is, but you get to the end and there's a ton of stuff. From there, it's a question of what optional buys will it be. What are the optional buys in this game? What are they going to add? Are they going to look like mechanics that should have been in the game? Optional buys in a game like this are going to be very tricky to navigate. Rising Sun only had one optional buy from a gameplay stance. It had the Dynasty expansion. Everything else was playmat, they had metal coins, but it was the Dynasty expansion. Since Rising Sun, CMON has gotten more optional buy happy. I don't know what they're going to do in this game, but this style of game where it's less, a fun beat 'em up like Zombicide or Cthulhu Death May Die or whatever, where it's more a tactical fighting experience, these games tend to be a little bit more tricky to fit in an expansion that simultaneously feels like a natural glove to the game, but also doesn't feel like it should have been in the base game. So these are trickier to add. Even Dynasty, honestly, Dynasty doesn't really, I haven't played with it, so take this opinion with a caveat, but Dynasty for Rising Sun, reading the rules doesn't feel like an expansion that was necessary. It feels an expansion that was there to get people to buy it. So similarly here, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what they're going to have. Blood Rage does a better job with the expansions, I think. They added kind of modules, mystics and gods, that very smoothly fit into the game, like extra things, but can also be taken out. Like I tell people, try Blood Rage retail, it's totally fine, it's a great game. But also, if you want the gods and the mystics, they're great little modules you can throw in. So I'm very intrigued what they're going to do with expansions in this game, and what they're going to add to the game in a way that feels natural and not clunky. So those are my main concerns for right now. We'll see how the campaign progresses. So far, I'm excited. I will probably do a follow-up video like I said at the beginning, but yes, I am backing Ankh. It should be no surprise to anyone who watches my videos. I believe that CMON in general hold their value. And plus, in general, I have liked their games. There are exceptions, but they're exceptions. I didn't like Arcadia Quest, but that's basically it. So I'm excited. I like the game. Let me know in the comments down below. Are you backing? Are you not backing? Why are you backing? Why are you not backing? Did you play Rising Sun? Did you play Blood Rage? Let me know your own opinions, your own thoughts in the comments down below. It's not just interesting for myself, but for people watching the video, I like that they have a mix of opinions to go off of. If you agree with me, make a note. If you disagree with me, make a note. It's helpful for anyone watching any of these types of videos, especially if I'm offering an opinion that's different. It's helpful for people to see and get a feel for what other people think, even if it's just a brief explanation of what's going on. In any case, I hope you liked this video. You can subscribe down below, ring the bell for notifications, like this video, comment, head on over to boardgameco.com to buy board games, sell board games, trade board games, any of that good stuff. And until next time, have a good one. I'm Alex, and have a good one.